Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is Muhammad Imran. I hope you're fine and would be enjoying learning with me. Today we will discuss language in and language out of context. Formally, this will be lecture number 3 in the subject discourse analysis. So let's begin how language is used in and out of context. Linguistic message. When we receive a message, we do not only pay attention to the words which are uttered, but we also pay attention to so many other factors apart from the language itself. For example, we pay attention to the body language, gesture, paralinguistic feature. By body language, we mean that what somebody is doing with their face, with their hands, with the body when they communicate or when they sending a message, or what someone is doing with the voice, whether rising intonation, falling intonation. In other words, what is the pitch or what happened to the voice of the speaker. For example, it may be shaking. So such kind of features are known as paralinguistic features. Beside body language, gesture, and paralinguistic features, we are also influenced by the situation in which we receive a message. Like in what kind of situation we are. We may be happy, we may be sad, we may be nervous, we may be excited, we may be in the office, we may be in the market, while we may be driving. So, what is the physical context or what is the situation in which we receive a message? We are also influenced. And by our culture and social relationship with the participant. Because most of the time, the speaker and the listener might belong to different cultures or they might belong to different social setup. So when you have different social norms, so it will also influence the message you receive. Or when you belong to different culture, so different cultures will also influence the communication and the message we receive. Similarly, by what we know and what we assume the sender know. So there'll be two people. One is the speaker who will send a message, and one will be the listener who will receive the message. So here we focus that what the speaker knows and what the speaker assumes that the listener will know about this. In other words, we can say that it is a shared knowledge between the speaker and the listener. Because most of the time, the speaker will not say everything in message. The speaker will leave out something, okay? Or the speaker will leave out some of the words and the speaker will assume that the listener will know about this. And what happens that if the speaker assumes that the listener will know about this and the listener doesn't know, so then there will be miscommunication. So these are all other factors which also influence the message, right? So we do not only focus on the linguistic features or we do not only focus on the words which are uttered by the speaker, but we also focus that what the speaker is doing with his or her body and what is the voice quality, right? And beside this, we also focus that what is the situation in which the listener receives a message and what is the difference between the speaker and listener culture, or what is the social relationship between the speaker and the listener. And here we know that what the speaker assumes that the listener will know about what the speaker says. So these are other factors which influence our message when we communicate. So there are good arguments for limiting a field of study to make it manageable. So we can limit a field of study in order to make it manageable if we leave out the context. But once when we leave out the context, then we will also miss coherence. We will also miss unity. But it is also true to say that the answer to the question of what gives discourse is unity may be impossible to give without considering the world at large, the context. So it means that the context is very, very important in order to give unity to the text or discourse. So that's why we cannot ignore the context. And in context, we have also these all things like body language, posture, gesture, paralinguistic feature, and there is also situation, right? Circumstances, and there is also social and cultural relationship, and there is also shared knowledge. So we can leave these all things when we study or the field of language, or when we study a language, so we can leave this all out. But what will happen then? There will be no unity. So that's why that context is very, very important when we do discourse analysis. School of thought between 1930 and 1960. So there were so many school of thought between 1930 and 1960 who believed that context is not important. While analyzing a language, context should be ruled out from this analysis of language. So now, on the one hand, we have discourse analyst, while on the other hand, we have sentence linguist. Now, first we will discuss discourse analyst. Discourse analysts, they believe that context, knowledge of the world outside of the language should be studied to interpret the language. Now, discourse analysts believe that without having context, we cannot interpret language, or we cannot study language properly. So the study of language would be incomplete without studying the context in which a language occurs. So that's why they believe that context. Should be studied to interpret the language. While on the other hand, we have sentence linguists. That's quite opposite for discourse analysts. So context, knowledge of the world outside of the language should be ruled out to analyze the language. Now, these sentence linguists, they believe that when analyzing a language, so there is no role of the context. That's why the context should be ruled out when we analyze a language. The sentence linguists follow two procedures when they analyze the language or analyze a sentence. So one of the procedure they adopted was their intuitive knowledge, because they had linguistic competence and they were native speaker, so they idealize sentences, right? They use their linguistic competence, they use their intuitive knowledge, and then they analyze a language or sentence. While the second procedure they adopt was that they collect data. When people spoke, or they observe people, they collect data and then they analyze the language. While in this procedure, when they listen to people and they collected data, they remove those all irrelevant material. Like for example, the context, right? Particularly the context and other relevant materials which belong to the context, like paralinguistic feature, like situation, like shared knowledge, like cultural and social relationship. So these all things were ruled out and then they analyze the language. So these were the two procedures adopted by sentence linguists. One was to use their own intuitive knowledge, and second one was they observe the people or they collect the data and remove all irrelevant which were not important or necessary for them when they analyze a language or a sentence. Here we have the overall summary of this lecture. So we have two approaches to language study: sentence linguistic and discourse analysis. Now, sentence linguist data, there will be isolated sentences. They leave out or rule out the context. So each an individual sentence is analyzed, or they grammatically well formed. So these isolated sentences must be grammatically well formed, must be grammatically correct, must be grammatically in order, and without context because they do not bother the context. Invented or idealized. Idealized mean they use their own intuitive knowledge. And invented mean that they take example from the people or they collect data from the original context, but they leave out the context. The aim is what? To analyze sentences and language, not the context. On the other hand, we have discourse analyst data. So what do they do? Any stretch of language failed to be unified. So they focus that language must be unified and achieving meaning. So they do not focus on meaning and they focus on meaning. In context, so context is important for them and observed. So they also observe the context. So this is the difference between sentence linguistic and discourse analysis. So thank you so much for watching and listening this video. If you have any question, you can ask. Thank you so much.